Hi guys, Mrs. Erickson here. Call of the Wild. I'm going to pick up where I left off last time. We were reading about Buck and how he pulled the 1,000 pounds on the sleigh, and then started chapter 7 where Buck and the other sled dogs and Jon Thornton and his two partners are traveling across the Yukon in search of the mysterious gold mine. So we're going to continue there, and I'm going to read for 10, 11 pages today so that I only have to do one more after this. And we'll be done with the book. Spring came on once more, and at the end of all their wandering, they found not the lost cabin, but a shallow place in a broad valley where the gold showed like yellow butter across the bottom of the washing pan. They sought no further. Each day they worked, earned them thousands of dollars in clean dust and nuggets. And they worked every day. The gold was sacked in moose-hide bags, 50 pounds to the bag, and piled like so much firewood outside the spruce bough lodge. Like giants, they toiled, days flashing on the heels of days, like dreams as they heaped the treasure up. There was nothing for the dogs to do save hauling in of meat now and again that Thornton killed, and Buck spent long hours musing by the fire. The vision of the short-legged, hairy man came to him more frequently now that there was little work to be done, and often, blinking by the fire, Buck wandered with him in that other world which he remembered. The salient thing for this other world seemed fear. When he watched the hairy man sleeping by the fire, head between his knees and hands clasped above, Buck saw that he slept restlessly, with many starts and awakenings, at which times he would peer fearfully into the darkness and fling more wood upon the fire. Did they walk by the beach of a sea, where the hairy man gathered shellfish and ate them as he gathered? It was with eyes that roved everywhere for hidden danger, and with legs prepared to run like the wind at its first appearance. Through the forest they crept noiselessly, Buck at the hairy man's heels, as they were alerted and vigilant. The pair of them, ears twitched and moving and nostrils quivering. For the man heard and smelled as keenly as Buck. The hairy man could spring up into the trees and travel ahead as fast as on the ground, swinging by the arms from limb to limb, sometimes a dozen feet apart, letting go and catching, never falling, never missing his grip. In fact, he seemed as much at home among the trees as on the ground, and Buck had memories of nights of vigil spent beneath trees wherein the hairy man roosted, holding on tightly as he slept. If you don't remember, the hairy man they're talking about the caveman, like his ancestors. So it's, he's just kind of like daydreaming, imagining this. And closely akin to the visions of the hairy man was the call still sounding in the depths of the forest. It filled him with a great unrest and strange desires. It caused him to feel a vague, sweet gladness, and he was aware of wild yearnings and stirrings for he knew not what. Sometimes he pursued the call into the forest, looking for it as though it were a tangible thing, barking softly or defiantly as the mood might dictate. He would thrust his nose into the cold wood moss or into the black soil where the long grasses grew, and snort with joy at the fat earth smells. Or he would crouch for hours as if in concealment behind wow, themselves had fallen. Wow, I don't think I'm in the right place. Hang on. Okay. He would crouch for hours as if in concealment behind fungus-covered trunks of fallen trees, wide-eyed and wide-eared to all that moved and sounded above him. It might be, lying thus, that he hoped to surprise this call as he could not understand. But he did not know why he did these various things. He was impelled to do them and did not reason about them at all. Irresistible impulses seized him. He would be lying in camp, dozing lazily in the heat of the day, when suddenly his head would lift and his ears would cock up, intent and listening, and he would spring to his feet and dash away, and on for hours through the forest aisles and across the open spaces where the niggerheads bunched. He loved to run down dry water courses and to creep and spy upon the bird life in the woods. For a day at a time, he would lie in the underbrush where he could watch the partridges drumming and strutting up and down. But especially he loved to run in the dim twilight of the summer midnights, listening to the subdued and sleepy murmurs of the forest, reading signs and sounds as man may read a book, and seeking for the mysterious something that called waking or sleeping at all times for him to come. One night he sprang from sleep with a start, eager-eyed, nostrils quivering and scenting, his mane bristling in recurrent waves. From the forest came the call, or one note of it, if the call was many noted, distinct and definite as never before, a long-drawn howl, like yet unlike as any noise made by a husky dog. And he knew it in the old familiar way as a sound heard before. He sprang through the sleeping camp and in swift silence dashed through the woods. As he drew closer to the cry, he went more slowly, with caution in every movement, till he came to an open place among the trees and looked out, saw erect on haunches, with nose pointed to the sky, a long, lean timber wolf. He had made no noise, yet it ceased from its howling and tried to sense his presence. Buck stalked into the open, half crouching, body gathered compactly together, tail straight and stiff, feet falling with unwanted care. Every movement advertised commingled, threatening the overture of friendliness. It was the menacing truce that marks the meeting of wild beasts that prey. But the wolf fled at sight of him. He followed with wild leapings. In a frenzy to overtake, he ran him into a blind channel in the bed of the creek where the timber jam barred the way. The wolf whirled around, pivoting on his hind legs after a fashion of Joe and of all cornered husky dogs, snarling and bristling, clipping his teeth together in a continuous and rapid succession of snaps. Buck did not attack, but circled about him and hedged him in with friendly advances. The wolf was suspicious and afraid, for Buck made 3 of him in height, while his head barely reached Buck's shoulder. Watching his chance, he darted away, and the chase was resumed. Time and again he was cornered, and the thing repeated, though he was in poor condition, or Buck could not so easily have overtaken him. He would run till Buck's head was even with the flank, when he would whirl about at bay, only to dash away again at the first opportunity. But in the end, Buck's pertinacity was rewarded, for the wolf, finding that no harm was intended, finally sniffed noses with him. Then they became friendly and played about in the nervous, half-coy way with which fierce beasts belie their fierceness. After some time of this, the wolf started off at an easy lope in a manner that plainly showed he was going somewhere. He made it clear to Buck that he was to come, and then ran side by side through the somber twilight, straight up the creek bed to the gorge from which it issued, and across the bleak divide where it took its rise. On the opposite slope of the watershed, they came down into a level country where were great stretches of forest and many streams. And through these great stretches, they ran steadily hour after hour, the sun rising higher and the day growing warmer. Buck was wildly glad. He knew he was at last answering the call, running by the side of his wood brother toward the place from where the call surely came. Old memories were coming upon him fast, and he was stirring in them as of old he stirred in the realities of which they were the shadows. He had done this thing before, somewhere in that other and dimly remembered world, and he was doing it again, now, running free in the open, the unpacked earth underfoot, the wide sky overhead. They stopped by a running stream to drink, and stopping, Buck remembered Jon Thornton. He sat down. The wolf started on toward the place from where the call surely came, then returned to him, sniffing noses and making actions as though to encourage him. But Buck returned about and started slowly on the back track. For the better part of an hour, the wild brother ran by his side, whining softly. Then he sat down, pointed his nose upward, and howled. It was a mournful howl, and as Buck held steadily on his way, he heard it grow faint and fainter until it was lost in the distance. John Thornton was eating dinner when Buck dashed into camp and sprang upon him in a frenzy of affection, overturning him, scrambling upon him, licking his face, biting his hand, playing the general tomfool, as John Thornton characterized it, and while he shook Buck back and forth and cursed him lovingly. For 2 days and nights, Buck never left camp, never let Thornton out of his sight. He followed him with his work, watched him while he ate, saw him into his blankets at night and out of them in the morning. But after 2 days, the call in the forest began to sound more imperilously than ever. Buck's restlessness came back to him, and he was haunted by recollections of the wild brother and of the smiling land beyond the divide and the run side by side through the wide forest stretches. Once again, he took to wandering into the woods. But the wild brother came no more, and though he listened through long vigils and the mournful howl was never raised. He began to sleep out at night, staying away from the camp for days at a time, and once he crossed the divide at the head of the creek and went down into the land of timber and stream. There he wandered for a week, seeking vainly for fresh signs of the wild brother, killing his meat as he traveled and traveling with the long, easy lope that seemed never to tire. He fished for salmon in the broad stream that emptied somewhere into the sea, and by this stream he killed a large black bear, blinded by the mosquitoes, while likewise fishing, and raging through the forest helpless and terrible. Even so, it was hard fought. It was a hard fight, and it aroused the last latent remnants of Buck's ferocity. And 2 days later, when he returned to his kill and found a dozen wolverines quarreling over the spoil, he scattered them like chaff, and those that fled left 2 behind who would quarrel no more. The blood longing became stronger than ever before. He was a killer, a thing that preyed, living on the things that lived, unaided, alone, by virtue of his own strength and prowess, surviving triumphantly in a hostile environment where only the strong survived. Because of all this, he became possessed of a great pride in himself, which communicated itself like a contagion to his physical being. It advertised itself in all his movements, was apparent in the play of every muscle, spoke plainly as speech in the way he carried himself, and made his glorious furry coat, if anything, more glorious. But for the stray brown on his muzzle and above his eyes, and for the splash of white hair that ran midmost down his chest, he might well have been mistaken for a gigantic wolf, larger than the largest of the breed. For his St. Bernard father, he had inherited size and weight, but it was his his shepherd mother who had given shape to that size and weight. His muzzle was the long wolf muzzle, save that it was larger than the muzzle of any wolf, and his head, somewhat broader, was the wolf head on a massive scale. His cunning was wolf cunning and the wild cunning, his intelligence, shepherd intelligence, and St. Bernard intelligence, and all this, plus an experience gained in the fiercest of schools, made him as formidable a creature as any that roamed the wild. The carnivorous animal, living on a straight meat diet, he was in full flower, at the high tide of his life, overspilling with vigor and virility. When Thornton passed a caressing hand along his back, a snapping and crackling followed the hand, each hair discharging its pent magnetism at the contact. Every part, brain and body, nerve, tissue, and fiber, was keyed to the most exquisite pitch, and between all the parts, there was a perfect equilibrium or adjustment. To sights and sounds and events which required action, he responded with lightning-like rapidity. Quickly, as a husky dog could leap to defend from attack or to attack, he could leap twice as quickly. He saw the movement or heard the sound and responded in less time than another dog required to compass the mere seeing or hearing. He perceived and determined and responded in the same instant. In point of fact, the 3 actions of perceiving, determining, and responding were sequential, but so infinitesimal were the intervals of time between them that they appeared simultaneous. His muscles were surcharged with vitality and snapped into play sharply like steel springs. Life streamed through him in splendid flood, glad and rampant, until it seemed that it would burst him asunder in sheer ecstasy and pour forth generously over the world. Never was there such a dog, said John Thornton one day as the partners watched Buck marching out of camp. When he was made, the mold was broke, said Pete. Pie jingo, I think so meself, Hans affirmed. They saw him marching out of camp, but they did not see the instant and terrible transformation which took place as soon as he was within the secrecy of the forest. He no longer marched. At once he became a thing of the wild, stealing along softly, cat-footed and a passing shadow that appeared and disappeared among the shadows. He knew how to take advantage of every corner, to crawl on his belly like a snake, and like a snake to leap and strike. He could take a ptarmigan from its nest, kill a rabbit as it slept, and snap in midair the little chipmunk fleeing a second too late for the trees. Fish in open pools were not too quick for him, nor were beaver mending their dams too wary. He killed to eat, not for wantonness, but he preferred to eat what he killed himself. So a lurking humor ran through his deeds, and it was his delight to steal upon the squirrels, and when he all but had them, he let them go, chattering in mortal fear to the treetops. He's playing with them. As the fall of the year came on, the moose appeared in greater abundance, moving slowly down to meet the winter in the lower and less vigorous valleys. Buck had already dragged down a stray part-grown calf, but he wished strongly for a larger and more formidable quarry. And he came upon it one day on the divide at the head of the creek. A bank of 20 moose had crossed over from the land of stream and timber, and chief among them was a great bull. He was in a savage temper, and standing over 6 feet from the ground was a formidable an antagonist as even Buck could desire. Back and forth the bull tossed his great palmated antlers, branching to 14 points and embracing 7 feet within the tips. His small eyes burned with vicious and bitter light, while he roared with fury at sight of Buck. From the bull's side, just forward of the flank, protruded a feathered arrow end, which accounted for his savageness. Guided by that instinct which came from the old hunting days of the primordial world, Buck proceeded to cut the bull out of the herd. It was no slight task. He would bark and dance about in front of the bull, just out of reach of the great antlers and of the terrible splay hooves, which could have stamped his life out with a single blow. Unable to turn his back on the fanged danger and go on, the bull would be driven into paroxysms of rage. Paroxysms. At such moments, he charged Buck, who retreated craftily, luring him on by a simulated inability to escape. But when he was thus separated from his fellows, 2 or 3 of the younger bulls would charge back upon Buck and enable the wounded bull to rejoin the herd. Okay, I'm going to stop there because we only have like 11 pages left. We'll see you next time. We're going to do a bonus Saturday feature on this one so we can finish this book up. We'll see you guys.